Welcome back. I'm looking at the midground now, the main area of my subject, and I'm going to be painting this with an overall dark tone, save for the lighthouse itself. So some of the colors I'm using are burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson mixed with that. I'm going to be using some ultramarine blue in the latter stage, and probably a little bit of yellow ochre as well. My main thought here is to keep this midground on the dark side. So we have a medium tone in the sky, we have a medium tone in the foreground, and then a strong dark across the midground with a light area on the lighthouse. This is a great setup for a dramatic sunlit scene. My first goal is to kind of cover the area, covering it with this very warm reddish burnt sienna. I want to make it feel like the sun is striking the slope. The low sun is striking the slope, so leaving a few highlights. You notice the shape of the road is established. I'm coming down to the edge of the land where it meets the ocean and placing a few darks. We'll leave that ocean section white for the moment. Keep it moist by spraying it occasionally. I want the color to flow on. I'm going to be adding some darks to this, but I want them to be soft darks, not hard edge darks at the moment. And notice how I'm building in the shape of the grass. I'm able to define it from above. The grass is dried, so I can shape the grass as I wish. When I'm shaping it, I'm looking to make some of the grass blades bend towards the lighthouse. These sort of act as visual cues to guide the eye once again towards my main subject. And while it's drying, I'm mixing up some burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. I'm going to go to the rooftops and define the fronts of the buildings by painting the rooftops a darker color. The colors that I'm using here are burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And I'm working pretty much into a wet area. I'm working dry into wet so that the color, it has a soft edge. It's not a sharp edge. It may look sharp, but if you look at it closely, you'll see there's a little bit of a fraying on the edge. And but it doesn't move. I'm using a smaller brush here, details, but the color's quite thick, so it's staying put. Key to this is having the shape itself be still in the drying stages, not completely dry. When I do come against the sky, however, the sky is dry, so I'm getting a sharp profile to the house. Once I finish the rooftops, the chimneys, I'm going to carry some of this color across the horizon to show the base of the lighthouse. Start to paint some of these bushes that come down the side of the little hill that the lighthouse rests on. Quite dark now. Look at that. It's wet, so it appears darker. As it dries, this will lighten considerably, but you see my intention is to keep it on the dark side, this narrow hilltop, dark against the grass and dark against the sky. This brings even more of a dramatic effect to the lighthouse itself. The strokes I'm using are important too. As they come towards the grass, of course, they're narrow and they're shaping individual blades of grass. On the hillside itself, it's creating the feeling of a slope. That downward stroke it's very important to show the kind of surface area of the slope. I do this by placing the grasses with strong strokes coming downhill. We're leaving some of that original burnt sienna That orangey color is really going to glow as we build up the hillside. More and more, working with a small brush, working in a wet area, working dry into wet. And we'll carry some more of that into the front area as well, defining the shore, under the road, here and there to, just to give us a feeling of shadows moving across the hillside, or a different color of low-lying brush. Finish off some of the dark bushes that are against the sky. With this additional strong color, you can tell that the sky that was once so dramatic has receded. It's really receding against these darks and giving us a feeling of depth. More and more, this color looks, on first glance, to be a black, and it's composed of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. As it dries, you'll see the individual components of those colors come out more and more. It'll look less black and more colorful as it dries. Using this same color to make this grassy area come forward even more. I'm leaving some whites or some bright tips. This is intentional to get a feeling of the sunlight scooting over the tops of the grass. This section is quickly coming to a close, and we're going to go to some details in the lighthouse. The lighthouse itself is very flat right now. It's bright. We see the tonality that we like, but we'd like some of that sunset color to splash against our lighthouse, and we'd like to make it feel round. We'd like it to have a certain age to it also. It's been weathered, so we're starting with that same burnt sienna, but we're working into a wet area. The first stroke that I put down was a stroke of water right along the area where the color's transitioning from light to dark. So I get a soft transition, and this soft transition helps to describe a rounded form. I'm putting a dark touch to the back of the lighthouse to pull it out from the sky and give a more dramatic feel to the turning color that's in the front of the lighthouse. At the top, I'm adding some details: small brush, dry paper, a lot of control here, finishing off the top stage of the lighthouse. Looking for those rounded shapes at the top that are classic with any lighthouse. You see the top where the light typically shines out, defined against that light area in the sky. That was composed as well. And we'll add some windows and some of the banding that we typically see on a lighthouse. There we go. Yeah, the sunlight in this painting is growing stronger and stronger. It's not really until this stage of the painting that I start to feel comfortable with the light that's coming out. It's until this stage I feel like I'm guessing a little bit sometimes. But I think it's pretty clear now. You can see that the shapes are quite clear. The shapes of the clouds in the sky, dark against light. The shape of the grass in the foreground, light against the dark midground. The dark midground is quite strong except for the lighthouse. Small details at this point. Some deeper shadows. As it's drying off, I see some stronger shadows at the back side of these bushes, would work well. I see some sharper edges on the backs of the roofs would work well, perhaps the lighthouse itself. What I'm doing now is adding some pigment, light color to some of the whites of the grass. To me, they're a bit, well, I want to make the lighthouse feel brighter, and these whites are detracting from that ever so slightly, so I'm making these adjustments at the end so I can measure them against the lighthouse and see, well, I need to add a little wash of burnt sienna, a little bit of wash of yellow ochre to adjust the whites. I'm doing it to the road now. All these little adjustments is still, this front area is a little bright. I'm going to add a little more color to that and continue to adjust it. Well, my finger is pointed to the upper corner of the sky where I have that hard-edged cloud. It's been bothering me since the beginning, so I'm going to take a little water with that flat brush. And with the flat brush, I'm just dragging it across the edge is what I'm doing. And that softens it ever so slightly. And these last adjustments, sometimes I wait a day or two. I look at the painting for a day or two and won't adjust it until I'm sure that's what I want to do. Here I'm doing it right after finishing the mid-stage, and perhaps a little too early, but you can see how they're effective, softening that edge and so on.